Welcome back. We're here with Greg from the Foundation for Healthy Schools. Greg, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Easton?
I'm doing very well. I'm very excited to have you on the podcast because your foundation is doing something that I personally am um, a big supporter of. So I'm very, very excited to have you on today and to dive deep into what you're doing. So thank you for coming on.
Cool. No, thanks for having me. Appreciate
Of,
it.
of course. So your foundation for healthy schools was created to overcome some of the worst health crises we've seen in the United States. Where does this passion come from to create this foundation?
Oh, geez. Let's put it this way. We are dealing with the largest health epidemic that probably exists. And if you start looking at how that actually happens and making that connection to the food, truthfully, this is probably something I've been on a mission on probably for about 40 years now. I grew up on a hog farm. And the interesting component of that is, it's it had its challenges. I'll tell you that. You probably can't get a date when you end up being a hog farmer. I can tell you that. But um, we had a real close relationship with the animals on the farm. So even when you end up being in the corral with the animals, you could start seeing differences in their hair and their eyes and the hooves that they have, and you start recognizing how the difference in the growth rate ended up happening as a consequence of the feed and gestation rates. So it makes such a dramatic impact on that association between nutrition and healthy being. So we actually got to taking four of the largest food producers to court with government validation to verify that the feed was toxic. So, like I said, for 40 years, I've made those direct connections, and even me, I've always had to have health as a component of aspects of my life, just simply as a consequence of health consequences. So, I cracked my neck at 17. I had a motorcycle accident. I was flat on my back for 2 years from a motorcycle accident. Ended up herniating a disc in my neck 12 years ago. And when I had that motorcycle accident, I actually developed a addiction to painkillers. So when I had the neck herniation, I'm dealing with chronic pain on a daily basis. The last thing I ever wanted to do was get back onto any kind of these prescription opiates. So I developed the passion to heal through plants. So when we start looking at the baseline of what we are as human beings, you make that direct connection. And even from me, passion exists that we see kids that are just so digitally addicted to the cell phone nowadays, and most of them don't even know where their food comes from. And as a result of that, we're creating a sickness model for the future of kids. So I'd have to say that's probably where my biggest passion is we're creating a society of sick people as opposed to trying to create some kind of a preventative model for the future. We're not setting these kids up for success. We're actually setting them up to fail. So that's really the essence of how the foundation came into being.
What I find super interesting with your perspective is since you're a part of the older generation, you come from a perspective that has seen the evolution of the food industry. You've seen the evolution of what's been happening throughout the years. And then also with your experience as a hog farmer, you obviously got to experience it firsthand of like what's really going on behind the scenes. So I really like how you kind of have that perspective and you come from that perspective of like this isn't just something I'm passionate about for a random reason. I've had personal experience. And with almost 15 million of Americans youth and they're grossly overweight, how do you guys as a foundation aim to solve this problem?
Well, once again, it comes down to the food. So, what the entire program that we've developed here, it's kind of like a two-step process. The first thing is going into the schools and offering a presentation, like I had shared with you earlier. I just actually finished this morning. But it's the foundation of our association to health through plants, health through nutrition. And if you look at a human being, we're just essentially the sum total of only two things. It's information and nutrition, considering on an epigenetic basis of what ends up coming into the human body. But that education piece is so fundamental. So what we're looking at doing is trying to integrate this through all of the stakeholders that are involved, because when it comes to the kids, we're all stakeholders in this. There isn't anyone who isn't a stakeholder in this. So that is where we start. And the second part to that component is once we can see that schools are interested in bringing our program into the schools, the next component is essentially project management based, where we're going to facilitate the actual development of a cultivation system at that school that actually gets those kids not only directly associated to the plants, but it's the hands-on doing that actually increases retention rates that we're going to start seeing even from boards of education and even school administrations that are setting those standards of curriculums, that you're going to see the grades and the retention of the subject matters actually escalate dramatically. Because I don't know about you, but anytime when I reflect back in school, hearing a teacher reverberate all these textbooks at the front of the class, I mean, half of the time I was asleep, and there wasn't a chance I would end up learning anything. But now, if you take that model and you actually integrate the plants into it and the hands-on doing into that, and you start bringing industry to end up supporting the development of these structures, and we have the teachers that we end up having an executive board that backgrounds in some of the best nutrition people probably in the nation who have developed like culinary nutrition programs, business people, school educators, horticultural experience. It's something that we know we can actually introduce and do in a really cool way.
And can you kind of dive deeper into why is it so important for kids to have that hands-on approach when it comes to learning and educating them?
Well, once again, if you even look at the learning pyramids, as soon as you start to identify that, if you're just looking at basics, sitting in a classroom, learning from someone talking at the front, you're not really engaging much. So when you actually engage, more of the thought process on touching and feeling and engaging the senses, what essentially we're doing is we're activating more of the brain into what they end up learning to actually make something stick. You're actually developing even more neural connections directly associated to what you're doing. So as a consequence, this is something that hands-on approach dramatically increases any retention and helps these kids basically learn and get that connection back to life. They've got no connection to where their food comes from, and once again, they're stuck on a digital component, and it's an artificial world. So by being able to introduce this, where they're getting back in touch with nature, getting back in touch with themselves, getting back in touch with life, it's setting a new model of paradigm that we're hoping is going to make and affect change for the future.
And why do you think the American schooling system allows such toxic foods into the kids' lunches when they know that this can lead to disease and problems down the road?
Well, now you start getting into a little bit of a controversial type of an avenue. Um, but you have to remember that the market dictates. So it's the parents that buy the food for the kids. And unfortunately, if the parents are buying the foods for the kids, and this is what the model is, that we think that whatever you get in the grocery store is healthy and such, and we're starting to realize all the science that differentiates from that, you have to recognize that the sickness model is based on developing a healthcare system that's measured through GDP. So if you actually have a commercial structure that is directly tied to your health, you're actually encouraging a sickness model as opposed to a preventative model. So what our entire approach is based on developing that preventative model. So you're actually setting the kids up with a foundation for life. And the huge component to that is if you this Jesuits had an interesting comment where it was, give me a child until the age of 7 and I'll show you the adult. As soon as you start recognizing that you're formulating almost all of your development neural pathways already from when you end up being a child, um, it only makes common sense that we have to end up looking at creating generational change, starting with the schools, starting with the kids, where once again, we're all stakeholders. Because if we continue with the exact same process of this sickness model, we're already starting to see the statistics, as you mentioned, obesity, prediabetes, diabetes, and just even the younger population nowadays, the amount of cancer rates that are starting to escalate, we can start seeing that it's directly tied to the food. So when you have commercial industries like these 12 large major companies that are basically driving and dictating the market, and then you have people like the Kelseys that are sitting there with a nice cereal box
Yes.
to encourage the children to end up buying this product. And if you watch the corporation and you end up seeing the marketing people that say, well, we're hired to end up selling product and we directly target the kids. I'm sorry, but that's just wrong, and something needs to be done about that. And that's why this foundation exists.
Yeah, and like you said, when it comes to like the kids being younger and how it starts at such a young age, like it's everything that's involved. It's like the commercials they're seeing, it's what their parents are telling them, it's what's on social media. And it seems like to me that you guys are not only passionate just about the food, but you're passionate about cultivating happy, healthy, fulfilled humans.
We want to, I mean, let's look at human purpose. Like I said, we're the sum of only two things: information and nutrition. So if you're not looking at the quality of both, you're off human purpose. So our intent is to get people back in alignment with the foundation of what a human being actually is. So if we're continuing to build on a commercial model as opposed to a human being model, well, it's not going to take a rocket scientist to figure out why you're going to have a microchip in your head soon enough.
Yeah. And you touched on purpose. What do you think the purpose of being a human being is?
Well, you strive to end up being the best you can. I mean, you only got one life to live. So, I heard a great saying once before, a quote, we're born with two lives. The second one starts when you realize you wasted the first. So it just takes time through experiences, and maybe the gray hairs start to help you start reflecting back on life, kind of thinking, well, geez, maybe if I had done this, or maybe if I had done that. And now you start thinking and recognizing, well, why are we not doing this as a human purpose to identify what the best nutrition is, what the best information is, what the best lifestyles, habits to develop those best feelings and emotions to enjoy and experience life that allows that you have to have the nutrition that even allows that chemistry to even occur. So when we're looking at things like ADHD or just even the mood disorders that are existing with, I mean, these foods that are laced with, excitotoxins and addictive chemicals. Once again, this is wrong. It's just ethically and morally wrong. So, like I said, it's just a small little piece of the pie what we're looking to end up doing, and hopefully making that into a large piece of pie. But we're here to make a difference.
And when it comes to these foods and just the toxicity in American society in general, do you think there's a spiritual warfare aspect to this?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily a spiritual aspect, because I think if you're connected spiritually, you're looking at the human being as the foundation to evolve from, to become the best you can be, to be on purpose, to know what you want, and learning how to actually strive towards getting that, being able to author your own life. Without that, you're not. So you're a consequence of the external environment that you end up being exposed to. And that's where that information piece comes in as a sum of two.
And can you talk about how the Rockefellers have went along and destroyed our schooling system?
These are hard questions just simply due to the fact that we're looking at these developments almost 100 years ago. And if you start looking at 400 years ago, the development of the British East India Company and colonialization, and just even what they've done with the residential school systems that we're gaining so much attention with, to see the spiritual component beating the crap out of these kids to end up going on a certain line. Once again, the spiritual aspect of that really comes under question. So I don't necessarily consider this to end up being spiritual in the fact through a religious process. Once again, it's through a soul. You know you're doing the right thing. And in our system of what we have, we're not doing that right thing. Once again, when we start mentioning aspects of manipulative and deceptive marketing to persuade people to buy a product. So I have a hard time finding spirituality in that.
Yeah, and I think it's like you said, this started a long time ago, even past the Rockefellers and past, all of the when it comes to the people in power, because they know what's going on. They know how to manipulate, like you said, using those small tactics. And we actually talked about this on our call when we talked a couple weeks ago, and me and my business partner Brian found this very interesting. Why is pooping into the soil of a plant you grow so powerful?
The theory that I have if what you're putting into your mouth, and the digestive process starts already with what goes into the mouth, and you look at the microorganisms in the gut biome that break down the actual food so it's distributed to the entire human body and the cells of the body, um, we're we're missing. We're missing a lot. So the pooping aspect is if you're eating something and you're created that, let's say, for a lack of a better word, that spiritual connection actually even to the plant that you grow. And let's say that there is something through this microorganism connection that if you end up eating it, you end up digesting it. It's a proper food system. It goes through the body through proper cellular metabolic processes. You crap it out. Um, who's to say that when you have those crapped out microorganisms going back into the soil, you're actually not creating some kind of a closed loop type of a system based on health through the microorganisms that create that, help to create that.
Yeah. Do you think this is something they did kind of back in the day, like in like the ancient times when they had more of that like connection to source?
I'll give you actually a great example. My dad, he was born in Germany and through the war. So when they had their bomb sirens go into their bomb shelters, when it's safe to end up coming out, there's no house left and you have no food. You have to have your own food. So this is what they had to do to even fertilize those plants. And the one thing I will say is my dad's 87 years old and he is sharp as a tack. So, and I mean, if my dad actually won Canada's most valuable athlete, so he's always been involved in aspects of health, especially at the younger age. Um, but you start making those connections and start to see how this works, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. And with you being like a hog farmer and being on a farm that was raising things that were alive, especially at such a young age, did this give you more of a sense of like morality and like taking care of something at such a young age? Like, did that give you like, I don't want to say like an advantage, but like a different perspective on life versus someone like that, like grows up and just has to take care of themselves?
Hugely. I mean, if you actually care for the animals, and the thing that was a benefit from us is when we ended up going into that corral with the hogs, they're curious. They're amazing animals. But eventually one would end up coming up to us. You give them a little scratch behind the ear, they end up liking it. Next thing you know, even under the belly, next thing you know, they were actually lying down, stretched out. You could get every aspect of it. And the thing that was really amazing about that was, is not only when you started doing it with one, it came through the entire herd. Now, talk about crapping your pants when you end up having an 800-pound boar with tusks that are razor sharp about that thick coming up to you, looking for that pet. When you're looking for the out, just in case he ends up being angry at something. But next thing you know, he's lying down just like all the rest of them. So you connect that connection to life and you create that connection to animals, to end up realizing that we're all connected. Every aspect of this is connected. So if the kids aren't even connected with this through their food and what they're doing, um, I mean, we're really missing something here. They're not connected to nature. I have one little motto that's called connecting to nature's frequency, and it always resonates with me. And that's the one thing I'd love to end up introducing with those kids, to start resonating with that connection to nature. And like I said, you start working in environments that's based on attractive frequencies, good things come.
Yeah. And that was actually going to be my next question of what does the phrase connecting to nature's frequency mean to you?
I'm sorry, I just had a freeze there. Could you please repeat that one again, please?
What does the phrase connecting to nature's frequencies mean to you?
Well, just kind of like I said, I mean, you can get a little bit deeper with regards to that. I mean, even at a quantum physics type of a scale, but I mean, an atom has to come to vibration, and that vibration has to create some kind of a binding mechanism in order for matter to even occur. So, and I always think that there's two frequencies. You got attractive frequencies and you got repulsive frequencies, or the things that won't bind. So, if we start to learn how nature binds, to create the matter of life, our environment, our ecosystems, and the connections thereof. And then you start looking at the artificial connections on how you start looking at these bindings that start integrating into a natural process. Well, even at a cellular metabolic process or a cellular basis, you start to see, oh, geez, a misfolded protein, mutated cell, cancer. I mean, it's really, we're starting to get enough science and research to recognize that it really is as a consequence of what we're eating and how we feel about ourselves to become
Yeah.
on purpose.
I have one more question for you. If you could have dinner with two people, one person from the past and one person from the present, who would it be and why?
Well, I'll start with the first one because you know what? I love Joe Rogan. Um, um, I'd love to pick his brain, be even on his show at one point where we can just, he's just dealt with so many people and so many things, so much interest. Yeah, that'd be interesting. But so is RFK Jr. I mean, the guy is he's probably the first politician I can say that's standing up with a moral right that, irrespective of what political orientation you are, that's just right. What he's
Yes.
doing is right. I don't, the bickering with regards to, making sure that we have a continued sickness model that politicians end up getting their kickbacks for, even with this war crap that ends up going on, to encourage that nonsense. I mean, I went off on that kind of question. In the past, I'd love to pick Tesla's brain.
Yes.
Yeah.
What would one thing you would want to ask him?
He created free energy. I'd love to know how he could do that for the world.
Yeah. I actually have one more follow up question on the RFK. Why do you think RFK is the first politician to really hit on the health in America?
Well, I don't want to be too blunt, but he's the first one to stand up to an establishment, knowing what ends up being right and wrong as a consequence of his background, his experiences. You know, he's the equivalent of the pig farm through his learning, through everything that he's done, the companies that he's sued. He understands what's going on. And to me, he's on a moral purpose. This is admirable. This is something that I'm even inspired by. I think he's a hero as far as I'm concerned. And if there was any way that I could ever connect and be a part of the things that he's doing, I'd be on the first flight.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Greg, that's all the questions I have. How can people find you guys? And what is one thing you want to leave people with?
We have actually spent so much time trying to build an infrastructure because when you're building something that can be quite significant, especially even on a nationwide program, you really need a solid foundation. So I've been working at trying to make sure that the house is solid, the foundation for the house is solid. So that's where we're pretty much at. And we just finished launching our crowdfund. So you find us on www.foundationforhealthyschools.org. And on that, you'll end up seeing even a donate page where we actually launched our first crowdfund, where the executive team came together to answer questions like this to identify what we're trying to do in building this kind of infrastructure for the future. So, I mean, if people end up resonating with what they've heard and discussed with this here, um, support us, help us, because we're actually doing this to support the future of your family's health. It starts with the kids, and that's where we need the help.
And is there any last words you like to say to people?
We're all in this together. We are literally all in this together. It's a generational issue, and if you don't do it through the kids, as a consequence of what we're seeing in the markets already of supporting these ultra processed foods and these sugars and the excitotoxins and the extra antibiotics that are even in some of the food. I mean, I don't want to get too controversial, but we're in a real difficult situation. And you can look at trying to create new political parties, but even as a result of media that is very biased in a lot of ways, we're we're trying to open up discussions. So we're looking at our own podcast. We're looking at a live event of an open panel discussion upcoming here very soon too. So by being able to start, and even on LinkedIn, join us on LinkedIn at our Foundation for Healthy Schools company site, and that's where we're going to start posting a lot more information. But it's starting to create that following and that connection where, like I said, if we're all in this together, well, time is now and let's get at it.
I love it, Greg. I love what you're building. I'm here to support it. It's something that I'm super passionate about. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and answering these questions and having people learn more about what you're doing. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Easton.